Okay, first, we would like to say thank you because we always forget to say thank you. So, thank you, Rahel, for inviting us to give this talk. Thank you, ILHAM team, for putting all this together, and also Goethe Institute for sponsoring our trip to Sarawak for our research trip. And thank you everybody who's here today. On Saturday afternoon, it's time for sleep, but I'm very glad that you are here today. Okay. Okay, Ming and I, we went on a research trip to Sarawak on end of February. It was a 10-day research trip. Wallace actually went to Sarawak for more than a year. So, and he went there and stayed at the toughest of the places. This was 170 years ago. So compared to him, we were very comfortable. So before our talk start, I would like to point to an area of the drawing. Just remember this house. We will talk about this house later towards the end, or almost towards the end of the talk. Okay. Okay, so before we talk about Alfred Russel Wallace and Sarawak, we would like to talk about a prologue, how we got to Alfred Russel Wallace. So in 2021, we moved to Tangkak. It is a very small town in Johor. And from Tangkak, we can see Gunung Ledang every day. So sometimes she lets us see her because the clouds will sometimes cover the whole mountain. And sometimes she doesn't. Sometimes she completely disappears, as if she's not there at all. And we go about our lives ignoring the magic of these kinds of phenomena. So we started prior to Wallace and Sarawak. We started because we were in near Gunung Ledang at that time. So we started research on Gunung Ledang. Obviously, the first source was the Sejarah Melayu and Hikayat Hang Tuah, and also the descriptions of Malacca by a Portuguese writer at that time. And also, we researched a lot on academic papers, archival materials like photos and newspapers from different eras, creative interpretations, art like the Puteri Gunung Ledang film, and also literature. And also we asked around the people who live nearby in Tangkak, in Jasin, near Gunung Ledang. And also we heard about the indigenous people's version of Puteri Gunung Ledang. And then we discovered that actually Alfred Russel Wallace climbed up Gunung Ledang when he first came to Peninsular Malaysia. And then we discovered this through his book, The Malay Archipelago, which is a travelogue of Wallace's travels in the Malay Archipelago, which is now like the Kepulauan Melayu. The Malay Archipelago, I think, in English we don't use this word anymore, but it is the Kepulauan Melayu. And it was his travelogue of his travels here for 7 years. So who is Alfred Russel Wallace? So Wallace is a British naturalist who came to this area to collect animals and plant specimens to sell to the European market. In collect, it means that he actually come and hunted or trapped animals, killed them, prepared them, and then sent it back to Europe to be sold as collector's items, as taxidermies and whatnot, for private collectors and for museums. And then he also discovered an imaginary line that separates, among other places, Bali and Lombok, which he discovered that animals do not cross. Like for instance, the Bali and beyond part of the area towards the peninsular Malaysia, like Asiatic animals, placental animals like tigers, elephants, they do not cross over to the other line, which has marsupial animals like kangaroos, or even birds like parrots, which is more abundant after the Lombok area, whereas there's very few parrots on the other side. So he discovered this line. He didn't know why the animals cannot cross. No, actually, nobody at that time knew why animals do not cross that, because they don't understand about tectonic plates and the shifts of the earth. And then, of course, he's most famous for formulating the idea of theory of evolution independent of Darwin. And then actually, Darwin and Wallace ideas were presented together at the same time. The theory of evolution by natural selection was actually Darwin's and Wallace's theory of evolution. But through time, people forget about Wallace. And now a lot of people, when they think about evolution, it is Darwin's theory of evolution. So Wallace, his journeys coming to the Malay archipelago is slowly being forgotten for science, for the idea of the beginning of evolution. So in 1854, Wallace climbed Gunung Ledang. So on top is a description from the Malay Annals, not the Malay Archipelago, the Malay Annals, the Sejarah Melayu, about the Sultan's entourage that went up to Gunung Ledang to get the hand of marriage from Puteri Gunung Ledang. And the bottom is a description in the Malay Archipelago by Wallace, which described his climb and his struggle to climb up Gunung Ledang. So if you put these lines together, it seems like it flows very naturally from one to another. So we found a parallel between the mysticism in the legend of Puteri Gunung Ledang and also science in Wallace's writing, which we want to explore further. So this is a painting I did last year for my solar exhibition, which I sort of tried to think about the similarities between science and mythology. So on the left side, you see Wallace climbing up Gunung Ledang, and on the right side are the Sultan's entourage also climbing up Gunung Ledang. So eventually they will reach the top, but how they went up, how they describe their journey up, and what they understand about that adventure, like that experience, is totally different. So this is Wallace's travels in the Malay Archipelago. So you see the lines. You see all these lines moving back and forth across. So these are the places that Wallace traveled to in the Malay Archipelago. And he didn't do it in a very orderly fashion because he depend on hiring boats, mail boats. Mail boats meaning boats that carry letters, or passenger boats, or private boats he chartered. So he traveled, he was zigzagging back and forth in the Malay archipelago. So last year also I made a painting of, based on this map. And then I realized that there are many legends about female deities, especially mountain deities, or deities that are connected to exact geographical location in this region. So we want to explore the relationship between science and mythology in our artworks, because actually both for mythology oftentimes it talks about the origin of something, like the origin of Gunung Ledang. Why is there a Gunung, this particular Gunung? Why is there this particular sea? Why is there this particular rock? So it's the origin of something. And of course, the theory of evolution is the origin of species. So in a way, their similarities is that both of them appreciate nature in all its wonderful variety and power. And also, they want to understand in different ways how things where things come from, and how things change from one form to another. So then we made our own Wallace strips in order to flesh out what we have read. So because we are staying in Tangkak, which is very near Malacca, so we often go to Malacca and go to Gunung Ledang. And sometimes also when we went there, we also wondered about what was the situation during Wallace's time, what he experienced, and so on and so forth. So in the Malay archipelago, Wallace mentioned the different kinds of ethnic groups in Malacca. And also on his journey climbing up Gunung Ledang, he described the differences of elevation and the changes of flora that occurred in these different elevations. So for Singapore, like it is now, it is a hub where Wallace, he used Singapore as a place to travel from one point to another. For instance, when he first came from England, his first stop was in Singapore, and then he go to Malacca, and then back to Singapore again, where he met James Brooke, and then he went to Sarawak. After Sarawak, he came back to Singapore again and went elsewhere. So Singapore was sort of the hub where he resupplied, send and receive letters, and also his shipments of the specimens. And also sometimes he purchased other animal specimens as well in Singapore. So most of the specimens he collected himself, and there is a considerable amount of specimens. I think there are around 10,000 or more than 10,000 specimens, individual specimens. But occasionally, on very rare occasions, he also buys some specimens in Singapore. And one of the places he stayed in Singapore was St. Joseph Church in Bukit Timah. So Wallace stayed there, and he became very friendly with the pastor of the church, Father Anatoly. So we also wondered what a naturalist and a pastor discuss about when they are having a conversation. So also, we also visited Lee Kong Chian Natural History Museum. So when Wallace was here, of course, the museum doesn't exist at all. But why we visited there is because there is a bird specimen, the standard wing bird of paradise, which was actually discovered by his assistant, a Malay boy called Ali, which we now know him as Ali Wallace. Officially, it is discovered by Wallace, but actually it's discovered by Ali. But that's how things goes. And also, then we went to Sarawak, and where we follow Wallace's trial, and he actually traveled around the area of Kuching. Okay. So Wallace was in Sarawak from 1854 to 1856. So this is a map we found of by another a naturalist, a curator from Sarawak Museum, J.C. Moulton, who himself made a trip following Wallace Trail in the Southern River Basin. So this map was in 1914, and this is a map that charts Moulton's trail as well as Wallace's. So the red trail is Wallace's trail. So it is upside down, so you flip it right side up, then you can see exactly where it is. So Kuching is there. And if you put it together with Google Maps, this is sort of the trail of Wallace. And actually, Wallace traveled using the river systems. So I think during his time, it is the main mode of transportation using the river systems. And this is our route. So we are based in Kuching for our 10-day trip. So we went to Semenggol to see wild orangutans. And then we went to Ana Rise, Bidayu Longhouse, Peninjau, Bau, and Pangkalan Terbang. Wallace actually went to Bau and Peninjau. Although it is not drawn on his trail, the red line, but actually he went to Peninjau and Bau. But Bau, he did not mention anything. He said many people mentioned about Bau, so I shall skip over describing Bau in his Malay archipelago. So he didn't mention anything about Bau. But Bau is a very interesting place while Wallace was there, which we will elaborate later. And then Pangkalan Terbang is actually quite close to the border with Indonesia, with Kalimantan. So also our coordinator, he also wanted to us to know more about the relationship between Indonesia, people from olden times, between Indonesia and Malaysia. So he brought us to Pangkalan Terbang for us to see and experience that area. And then, of course, our longest trip is to Simunjang. So we travel to Simunjang by the Pan-Borneo Highway, whereas Wallace, he traveled through the river system. In Simunjang, we stayed for about half a day, whereas Wallace stayed there for 8 months, where he hunted, collected most of the orangutans in Simunjang. Okay, so now I will pass the mic over to Minghua. Okay.
When we arrived in Kuching, we took a boat cruise on the Sarawak River to get a sense of how people in the past used to live and travel using the river systems. As we passed by the Astana, the exact site of James Brooks' house, we tried to imagine how it looked like when Wallace rode up to its bank after a 12-day trip from Singapore. Our second stop is Ana Rise. Ana Rise Longhouse is the oldest Bidayu village in Sarawak. After James Brooks banned hunting, the Biana, who originally lived in the mountains nearby, moved down to the valley and settled near the river.
So that you are able to cut at one end and also the other. And this thing, see? And then the bamboo naturally has knots here, so you shut off the knot. And for you to be able to open it up like this, although you cut at one end, you open it up. You cannot open right away when you still breathe, so you have to put an extra heavy weight on top to make it.
We were greeted by Arthur Coleman, Anna resident and renowned Bidayuh musician who plays the pradongang. He is one of the few who still knows how to make them. He explained about the longhouse and how bamboo is used in different ways, from constructing the longhouse to cooking and making musical instruments. What we experienced in Anarais reminded us what Wallace wrote on bamboo in the Malay Archipelago. On the 1st of March, we reached Bukit Peninjau, also known as Bungwang, with a sense of excitement and defeat. Excited because we knew there's a restore cottage up there, where Wallace stayed and captured thousands of moths by placing a lamp against the whitewashed wall at night. Defeated because we knew we would not be able to see it. It was here that Wallace first mentioned Ali, his most dependable assistant, who contributed much to his research in the Malay Archipelago. Wallace visited Bao but did not describe it in his book. We wanted to visit Bao anyway because we thought this small town played an important role in the history of Sarawak. It might help us understand the political and social undercurrents brewing at the time when Wallace was there. We first arrived at Siniawan, a sleepy town now revived by a weekend night market, attracting both vendors and visitors from nearby Kuching. Near Siniawan, there is an isolated Chinese temple with an unmarked grave. This temple is dedicated to Liu Sanbang, leader of the 12 Kongsi of Maosan. In 1857, a year after Wallace left Sarawak, Liu Sanbang launched an uprising against James Brooke. They were angry because of the tax imposed on the gold mine colony. 600 people rode secretly downriver from Bao, across Siniawan, to Kuching and set Brooke's house on fire. The surprised Brooke escaped by jumping into the Sarawak River. Later, Brooke responded and overwhelmed the insurgents. But in British records, there's no mention of the name Liu Sanbang. Would Wallace have had met him when he was visiting Bao? Tasik Biru was originally an open-cast gold mine. A Bao resident now based in Kuching, who worked for the gold mining company in the 1990s, told us her experience working there. She remembered hearing warning sirens signaling a blast was going to happen, then explosions, and tremors that shook the whole town. Simunjang was an important site for our research. Wallace stayed in Simunjang for 8 months, living amongst Chinese coal mine workers. They were building railway tracks from the newly opened mines to the Sadong River. Wallace saw his first orang-utan just 1 week after his arrival. They were so abundant. What follows was the most blood-curdling description in the Malay archipelago, where Wallace excitedly hunted, shot, maimed, and killed these gender creatures. We went to the bottom of Gunung Ngeri, the major coal mining site during the 19th century. We interviewed the village head, Kapitan Lai, who descended from 2 generations of Simunjang coal miners. He did not work in the coal mines. He only heard stories from his uncles. Mr. Lai told us that he saw orang-utans quite often during his youth, but now they are no more. We want to observe orang-utan in their natural habitat, so we went to Semenggol Orang-Utan Rehabilitation Center. Rescued orang-utans were introduced to Semenggol in 1975, and they remain in the area and frequently return during feeding time. Early in the morning, we were able to walk on the Santubong riverbed because of the low tide. Upon reaching the middle of the riverbed, we turned around and saw a house on a small hill underneath Mount Santubong. The house is located on the same spot where Wallace stayed and wrote his Sarawak Law. The scene looked eerily similar to an 1892 etching print showing James Brooks' cottage. It was in Santubong where it all first came together. In February 1855, Wallace was staying in James Brooks' cottage under this Mount Santubong, where he wrote on the law which has regulated the introduction of new species, also now known as Sarawak Law. He was working on the theory of evolution independent of Charles Darwin. Walking towards the direction of the house, we approached a group of naturally formed giant rocks. One looks like a head of crocodile. It's a legend connected to Santubong, that of a beheaded crocodile turned into rock. There are many legends associated with Mount Santubong and the surrounding area. Perhaps they are inspired by the existence of human activities there a long time ago.
Okay, now it's back to me again. Okay, Sarawak. For our work, hold on. Okay, for our work, we aim to get an accurate picture of Wallace's journey and of that time period. But it was 170 years ago. No living person now has ever had any contact with Wallace. And there are very few photos that exist of that time of Sarawak. But at least the river is still there, and life still revolves around the river systems in Sarawak. So it was easier for us to imagine what life was like back then. And there is actually a huge amount of record on Sarawak and Borneo during that time from mostly European explorers, travelers that wrote travelogues during that time, mostly about Rajabrook, the indigenous people, and also the natural environment and the animals. So there is also a lot of archival materials now widely available on the internet. And also we were able to chat with the local people when we were there and talk to them about their experience growing up on the locations and their point of view. So also our advantage for this project we are working on is a cross-disciplinary collaboration. I'm from the visual arts, and Ming is studied in sociology and work as a journalist. So we combine our efforts together for this project. So after all this, what is all this for? Why do we want to talk about Wallace? Because we are making a graphic novel. At first, it was like we mentioned earlier on the slides. At first, it was we wanted to write to make a graphic novel about Puteri Gunung Ledang and all the female mountain princess deities around this region. But then we discovered Wallace, and then we actually written the first draft for that part of the story. So then we discovered Wallace, and we decided to do a spin-off. So spin-off is Wallace. And because for Puteri Gunung Ledang, for the legends, actually there is not a lot of materials around that talks about that in a very objective way. Whereas with Wallace, during that time period, there's a huge amount of archival materials which we can depend on. So for this comic book, we decided to start this first because we can work on materials that are more readily available or less prone to interpretations. So the title for now is Before Evolution, Alfred Russel Wallace in Sarawak, which looks like something that AI writes a title. So it's still a working title, and we are at this point in time just started earnestly working on the graphic novel. So although our graphic novel is a historical fantasy fiction, so we are including some elements of fantasy in the book, we strive to be historically accurate as much as possible. And also, we also want it to be chronological. Chronological meaning we follow Wallace's journey from one place to another, and we don't skip or we put the one that is more important for the climax. Actually, the more important happened the first time when he went to Santubong. So character design, and for this time we also, a bit over contrast, but never mind. So for this time we also decide to draw with a tablet pen. I hate using computers to draw, but I think because this is a collaboration, which we wanted to both our feedback. So if, for instance, I finish drawing a page and then Minghua don't agree, and then she says, okay, this character should be like this more. It's more true to the character. It's very hard for me to make another piece of drawing. But with computer, you have different layers. You can move things around, and then you. So it's a choice of using computer. And also, we wanted to make a graphic novel, comics, because we think it is a better medium as compared to what I've been doing in the fine arts or in paintings. We think it is a better medium for storytelling. So we decided to use the graphic novel. And also, it is more approachable to a lot of people. So for this character design, because sometimes when you're drawing a character, you need to think what it will look like in different situations. So he has different clothes based on the different places or different situations he is on. So and we base this on the research we had. So on the furthest left is a portrait of him, I think 1 year before he came to the Malay archipelago. And before that, he was actually 5 years in the Amazon. So he spent 5 years in the Amazon, went back to England, and then a year afterwards came to the Malay archipelago. So I think that's why he is a bit chubby, because I think in the Amazon he really starved. So when he went back, this is our thinking. So we also have to think about how the character, we have to, because we are making a comic, so we have to think about characters as well. So we think that he was feeding up after being starved for so long. And then when he came, and the second picture is actually the only photo he has ever taken in the Malay archipelago. And this was on the day he left the Malay archipelago. So after 7 years, then he took this photo, dressed up very nicely, took this photo in Singapore, and then he went back to England. So, and this photo, he is quite thin, and also his face is full of beard and mustache. And we also face this problem of whether or not this is the image that a lot of people associate Wallace with. But we think it is because he was really having a hard time here. So therefore, he is more thin than he usually is. And then we also base, there is a BBC biopic about him made in the 1980s, 83, where so we based his hunting attire on that part of the documentary. And also when he went to Indonesia, in the biopic he was wearing, maybe because he's gotten used to the life here, he is more comfortable wearing local clothes. So when he was in Ternate, where he wrote his theory of evolution, he was, in the biopic, he was wearing a Malay costume. So we imagine him wearing the Malay costume. And also, the last photo of him, portrait of him, was labeled. This is soon after he returned from the East. So we assume this is after he came back from Singapore and not too long afterwards. So our creative process also, besides the colonial documentation, archival materials, we also are inspired by local materials. So this is a very popular song. I think many people would know about this song. I don't know. I can't sing it, but I think you might have heard it. Maybe you Google later and then you listen to it. So this is the legend of Putri Santubong. And it is a lyric, like this is part of the lyric. It's a song written by Malaysian Mazi Johari in the 1970s. And it has become a very popular song in Malaysia. And so we use the song in our comics as well. So before drawing it on the computer, I would draw it on a piece of paper, but in actual size, meaning the size that we want the comic to be published in, so that we can know how many words we can fit into the paper, where it is big enough, still big enough for us to read the words, and not too crowded. And then also we actually did a lot of research and wanted some expert opinion. So before we went to Sarawak, we actually contacted a Wallace expert, a person called Dr. George Becaloni, who was the curator of the Natural History Museum in London. He's now since retired from that, but he is the director of a website called Alfred Russel Wallace Correspondence Project, where he compiled all Wallace's correspondence and is available for everybody. So you can also go and check. So a lot of our ideas, our research came from that. And of course, his opinion was very invaluable to us. So before we went to Sarawak, we actually emailed him, and then he responded and gave us a paper stating that exactly where Wallace wrote Sarawak Law. And at the beginning of the slideshow, I asked you to remember the house. So actually, this house is where Dr. Becaloni he cross-checked with other archival references, and he surmised that actually that was the house that Wallace stayed in where he wrote Sarawak Law. And also another great source of information was Wallace Online, which is run by another Wallace expert, Dr. John Van Wyk, who is currently in NUS, National University Singapore Biology Department. So, and then we combine together the legend of Putri Santubong, so the song, the Putri Santubong, with the drawing of Santubong Mountain and the house. Actually, this image is too contrast on this screen. Actually, there is a very vague image of Putri Santubong here and Putri Sejinjang here, but you can't see it because the screen is too contrast. So actually, why Sarawak Law is so important? Sarawak Law is sort of Wallace's first avowal to his theory of evolution. So actually, Charles Darwin, he was working on the idea of evolution since the 1830s, I think, 1830s. But he has been trying to gain more and more information. So he was working on this evolution idea for 20 years or more than 20 years already. And for 19 years already. So he was compiling like pigeons or barnacles. So he was trying to combine like all these things must fit into his theory. And he was keeping secret the theory of evolution. Whereas suddenly a young person called Alfred Russel Wallace, out of nowhere, he is more known as a person who sells specimens to the European market rather than a naturalist, suddenly comes up with the same idea before anybody else in the world knows about it. So Sarawak Law is written it's sort of his first avowal of the theory of evolution. So sort of his first draft of the theory of evolution, and it happened in Santubong. So this is another page where we made a drawing of him writing Sarawak law on the little house under the Santubong mountain. And how we got that, the title that is the hand-drawn title is through looking at Wallace's manuscript, different manuscripts, and then we try to find the words that are similar or the exact words, and then we tilt it a little bit because the picture is a bit more upright, more slanted, I mean, and then we try to mimic Wallace's handwriting, and then we put that into there. So for our graphic novel, there is a lot of research we want to put into the work. So besides Wallace, we also want to include some other natural history drawings from the past to create the atmosphere of how 18th century and 19th century artists or scientists view the natural world during that time. So we wanted to put this image somewhere in our comic book. This is by a famous German woman natural history illustrator called Maria Sibylla Merian, who actually is also a scientist. She was the first one who sort of discovered that actually the metamorphosis process of butterflies. And also besides her, we also want to put illustrations of natural history drawings from our region, mainly from this book, because we have this book. And actually these books, the illustrations are by people who now we don't know who they are. So I think a lot of them are maybe Indian people from India, illustrators from India who make these illustrations. So we also wanted to slit these things into our comic. And the good thing is because these are all a few hundred years ago, so they're all copyright free now, so we can use them as we please. And of course, we also want to include Wallace's own drawing. So this is his drawing of a flying frog from Simunjang. Actually, he discovered this for science. And this is his drawing. So thank you very much. Hope you all had a good time. Thank you. So any questions? Okay. They will bring the mic around for you.
Okay, thank you for the session today. Well, the first is really a comment, and the second is it's more of the question. So when you talked a lot about historical accuracy, I think one point that you might need to be careful about is the use of terminology within Wallace's text and other scientific texts at the time. Because even in The Origin of Species, Darwin didn't really use the term evolution. And so I think you need to pay attention to those kind of nuances, especially developing a title and perhaps in a dialogue that shows up in a graphic novel. So I think that kind of attention would be important. Well, and also I think related to that, there's also a need to look into the broader historiography around different theories of evolution. There was Lamarck, for example, very different ideas, but but basically it's an old theory, so the mechanisms are the way that it's been explained, they've kind of changed over time, so I think that's something to pay attention to. And now I think I'll move on to the question. How would you situate your work that you have today within the context of the ongoing exhibition right now around plantations, exploitation, and that sort of thing? If you can comment on that. Thank you.
Okay. Okay. Thank you for the comment because we also because we are not our knowledge of biology is very limited actually. So we are also trying to inform ourselves more about that So. Also, especially on terminology as well, especially as time goes by, there are also certain terminologies that might be offensive for now but if used on for now. So we are also we want to be aware of that and we hope that we don't slip too much out from that. But having said that, we also wanted to use, because this story happened in the 1850s, so we also hope to use the way they speak also, how they refer to certain people, like how instead of referring to orang-utan, the way they write orang-utan is different, like orang-utang or something like that. Or they even refer them to, especially Wallace, he refers them to as mias. So he says it's how the local people used to say that. And also about the different theories of evolution, as compared to Lamarck's evolution theories. We are also trying to brush up on them. We are also trying to understand what's the difference between like Lamarck's theory, where, for example, how they transmutate is because of for instance, the giraffe desires to reach the leaf on the tree, and then they will will themselves, or they practice so much that the neck grows to become taller, instead of the species changing by mutation and passing of genes from one generation to another. So we are also trying to understand that. And also, we are also informing ourselves also on newer ideas about evolution, and especially now there's a very sexy theory of fungi, where they have a certain way of communicating with each other, and in terms of showing spreading resources or giving warnings. So we also wanted to learn more about that. But thank you very much for reminding us that we have to be very careful about that. Another question is sorry, for the question. For the plantation pot, I also don't know, because this work is not for this exhibition. It just so happens that we are giving a talk about that. But we also thought that when we were doing our research and when we are doing this, preparing this presentation, what we realized is actually this is a period of time where large-scale plantation haven't happened yet. The first rubber plant was planted in 1879, 1887 or something like that, which is like 30 years after Wallace left. So and then when we are talking about coal mine in Simunjang, they were still cutting down trees and building the railway tracks. So this was before Malaysia Malaya become industrialized as we know it today. Like we now we read our history, like Kereta Api Tanah Melayu is 1889 or something like that. Or Rubber Camp 1880s or something like that. So these are like pre-plantation era that we are dealing with. So maybe that is relevant. I don't know. Yeah. Next.
Sorry, can I just ask, what's your actual angle on this whole narrative, if I might ask? I mean, what's your angle on the story? Is it just about Wallace?
Oh, the angle of the story. Okay. Actually, we are trying to... it's actually not really just about Wallace, but Wallace is a very fascinating character for us to weave a story through. And we want to... we are still working it out at this moment in time, but we want to weave in environmental messages and also local beliefs. Like Wallace wrote Sarawak law in Santubong. Santubong is a very important site, not just for the legend of British Santubong, but also it has maybe more than 1,000 years of human activities there. So when we went there, Santubong is a Malay village. When Wallace was there, Santubong was a Malay village. But before that, it was Iban settled there. And for instance, like the legend of Putri Santubong, for us, we are not sure, seems to be a Malay legend. But there is an older Iban legend of a parallel legend, we feel. And also the meaning of Santubong in the Iban language is actually grave, coffin in the Iban language. So there is an older idea of what that place is, an older kind of religion or points of view of how things were. So we wanted to weave these things together because, like we mentioned before, evolution is, the theory of evolution is about the origin of life. And a lot of mythology is also about the origin of life, or the origin of like this mountain or the origin of this river. So we try to weave these two elements together because I think besides both of them trying to understand what origin is, they are also trying to express their admiration for nature. And also because of the situation we are now with climate change and all that, we also want to contrast where an early naturalist with all the enthusiasm of trying to discover what nature is, but at the same time also killing orang-utans here and there and collecting things like it's normal for them to do that. Whereas if now you kill an orang-utan, it is a completely different situation. So we also want to contrast that, hopefully, in our work.
So why I ask that question is because the thing is the whole journey of Wallace's through Southeast Asia. I mean, it's a fascinating one, but I'm just wondering how that's why I asked that question, because there's so many different angles and aspects of it, and I still don't get what is the actual pivotal angle that you're putting on it, because there's so many different aspects once you go from Sarawak. Because like there's so many things, like for example, he had his assistant Ali, which he sometimes sends off. He's not even on that journey, on that trip, when he goes to collect, say for example, birds of paradise or other insects and creatures which he himself may not have followed. Then you've got the local culture, and then you've got the local perspective. You talk about the mythology, but there's also the local, very much prevalent mythology, whether it's in their practices of hunting and living, which would add to, in a way, how we live with nature and so on and so forth. So I'm just wondering, because at the end of the day, if you're just going to perpetuate the same kind of thing, you're making it up, because no one actually knew how what happened in his journey, just as much as the mythologies you're talking about. It's also another story which is made up over the years. So I'm just kind of fascinated to know, how are you going to weave that? And you yourself said the whole killing, when they had to do the orangutan, I mean, going through in that forest is actually, he's an intruder, and it's actually really, really brutal what they had to do. Sometimes they shot the orangutan's younglings, who would not fall to the ground, but fell in between the branches and would suffer before the creatures died. How did that impact, when you talk about nature, within the local community, and how the local community, I mean, you know what I'm trying to say? So then you get a different kind of dimension from just, here's a Westerner who comes along, looks at the forest, the jungle, and nature, and then you just follow the same kind of narrative. That's what I'm saying. I'm just wondering how you would approach that.
Actually, that is the contradiction of the colonial British gaze, colonial British perspective, and also how he, like you say, like the intruder, like the all this aspect of it. I think that is also very interesting for us, and we also want to explore that in this graphic novel. Yes, in terms of the local opinion also, we are also trying very hard to understand about the indigenous culture, and because also Wallace also mentioned his admiration of how their use of bamboo, for instance, or he also mentioned that, for instance, when he was comparing the indigenous people he stayed with the people in European cities, where he says there is enough food to go around, and why were they not prospering? And one of the idea he thought was because the women were not taken care of, because the women were working a lot, and then because of that they could not properly nourish themselves and protect the children or give birth. So that is from Wallace's point of view of the indigenous people he was staying in. So we are also trying to understand more about the other aspect, and from the other point of view. As for what Ali is a very interesting character, because it's sort of like, especially recently, Ali Wallace has been somebody that is, a lot of people have been trying to understand actually what his contribution is, or whether his importance in the theory of evolution, or his importance in assisting Wallace has been undermined, or whether Wallace actually did as much as people claim, or he himself claimed that happened. So these are issues that are interesting now because of where we are now, and what we are now, and so these are also issues that we would like to address in our work. So we would just say we will try to understand and include more, and hope you can, when the graphic novel comes up, hope you can have a good read at it and give us a good comment. That's all we can say for now. Yes.
Thank you. Yoong, Right. I think I want to just, maybe it's sort of a comment as well. I think you have addressed, you have engaged with the Wallace in your STEM series before, isn't it?
Uh-huh.
Right. And you have also made references to Ali in the STEM series. No?
No.
So it's just the Wallace in it. Huh? Darwin and Wallace. So I think that's why, not to absorb you guys from some of the potential critique coming from the floor, but I suppose that, and in a way, I think that I feel that looking back at some of your work, especially the STEM series, you have always been quite aware, both of you have always been quite aware of this power dynamics in terms of coloniality, modernization, and storytelling. I think what is interesting for me this time is your direction, thinking about, as visual artists collaborating with a researcher and sociologist, thinking about the interface between science and myth. It will be, I think it could be interesting if you think more about that and think about how that contrast or engagement or the conflict between science and myth, okay, could sort of be delivered through the storytelling. I think this is very much of my comment, that what I hope to look forward to, right? And perhaps that can sort of shift, not necessarily navigate, but way of responding to the question from William and as well. Thanks.
Sorry, Chang. By the way, what I said earlier, I wasn't placing any moral judgment on that. I just think would be really interesting. If it's brutal, show the brutality. It's not, we understand the whole idea of colonization and so on and so forth. That becomes almost like, it becomes just part of core, it's just normal. But what I'm saying is, when you talk about myth and what Yap was talking about, trying to contrast, say, for example, mythology on the myths against science, then I'd say show the brutality, get down to the fact that it is what it is. You are intruder into the land, you are interloper into the land, and what is interesting and what happens then, because the locals will have a very different way of dealing with certain animals or insects as, for example, food source, or as coloring for their fabrics. And I think, so I'm not trying to, it's not a woke statement. I'm just saying it will be really interesting.
Mm-hmm. Huh? Yeah, I totally agree with you. It is a very interesting thing to show the brutality. In fact, actually, a lot of Wallace's biographers or even the BBC biopic, they tend not to want to show that the brutality he did in hunting the orangutans. It is something that I think a lot of people who come to like Wallace, and I'm also one of them, they try to avoid that because it is something that is problematic to say the least about that. We do want to show the brutality, and I think in comic form, if you read comics, it can be very brutal if you want it, because it's graphic. So maybe it can be shown that way, in a more graphic way. Graphic meaning in pictures, and also graphic meaning in the brutality and the violence of maybe we are also thinking the way to depict this kind of intrusion into this land is through the killings of the orangutans. Maybe that is one way we want to depict it. And but we wanted this to focus more on the idea of nature more than people. So I think for our graphic novel, we have decided to take away James Brooke, because James Brooke is a very interesting character. Is also a very problematic character. And also while Wallace was in Sarawak, he's actually more like a guest of James Brooke, and he stayed at James Brooke Cottage in Simunjang, in Peninjau, and also in his house. But we wanted to take that away because then we might fall into the trap of the colonial gaze, the kind of social-political situation at the time, which, and our interest is more about nature and how mythology and evolution can be not contrast, but more parallel thinking, but it's different ways of thinking, but it is parallel. Yeah. Yes. Mike's.
Okay, so this is not a critique, it's just a comment, and just to help you contextualize this whole talk. Oh, you can't see me?
Can't see.
No need lah. Don't need to understand. I'm just trying to contextualize this talk with this whole exhibition right now, especially in the context of plantations. So we are coming from the Sarawak setting. The context of Sarawak, when you say about there's no plantation, or at least formal plantation back in the 1850s, a plantation is still a plantation. There are still labors, forced labors, and there is still trauma behind them. So in the context of Sarawak bordering with Dutch Borneo, Dutch Kalimantan, it's actually a chessboard during the 19th century empire. So there are banana plantations, pineapple plantations, black pepper plantations, and the victims in those stories were the Dayaks, the Malays, and some of the independent Chinese republics around there. So that is just the Sarawak context. Maybe it's not formal, but it still happened. In another context where, well, it's the 1850s, 19th century, and plantations were popping up around Southeast Asia during Wallace's journey, it actually helped formulate his idea of conservation, and also the idea that species can go extinct, because during the 19th century, the whole idea is that no species can go extinct, because why should they go extinct? God created them, so God must be merciful. So he noted this, not in Sarawak, not in some exotic Borneo, he's noted this in Singapore, because Singapore were one of his stops, many stops around his journey. During his early stops, he found that beetles and also all the insects that he was interested in around. There was a lot of many rare species that even if you go to Gunung Ledang right now, you cannot find. But then in the later part of his journey, when he came to Singapore just to check around, suddenly, where are all the insects and beetles and butterflies that I saw were? And actually they went, I wouldn't say extinct, they were extirpated, because during his early stops in Singapore, the forests were being felled. And when the forests were being felled, the wood that fell were rotting away, and the beetles were interested in that. But over time, when those felled forests gave way to plantations, it's not just rubber wasn't there. Rubber was there, it's called gutta percha. So anyways, the plantations were popping up. And then he noted that, oh, species do go extinct. Species are getting eliminated because of human interference, because of agrarianism. So that is just the context of plantation, if you want to go for this sort of angle in this talk. Okay, thank you.
Thank you for your comment. We tend to forget that before the full-scale plantations, that the rubber plantations and there were smaller scale plantations, experimental plantations before that. Actually, even in Sarawak also, I think Wallace also mentioned about the destruction of the environment will create a sort of imbalance. But for instance, when he was in Simunjang, he was very happy to be able to collect a huge amount of beetles. And actually, he mentioned that the beetles he collected in Simunjang was the most he collected in his whole journey in the Malay archipelago. And why he said that was the case was because the people were actually cutting down trees to build the railways. And the rotting trees were food for the beetles, for the larvae of the beetles, and therefore there was a lot of beetles. There was an abundance of beetles. So in a way, he didn't explicitly say that it created a negative imbalance, but I think he was even aware of there is an imbalance of human intrusion. Even for him, it was very positive because he can collect that amount of beetles. But I think even at that point, he was aware of that. Yes.
Okay. I want to make a short comment. So me as a tourist just randomly came in today. I have no prepared knowledge about the arts, about Wallace and anything. I don't know anything. I just came in, want to visit the museum. So I'm not into this field at all. But I feel fascinating about your methodology. Mm-hmm. I'm a political student from Singapore, studying international relations, basically like a political science. So I found fascinating about the methodology is you are using the interdisciplinary methodology. You're using art to explain social sciences or humanity or biology, whatever. Mm-hmm. And the form you are using is a graphic novel. Mm-hmm. So I will say we can use thousands of interpretations from thousands perspectives to understand your novel. So there's no fixed answer, right? We audiences can have thousands perspectives. So you recall what Wallace's journey in the modern era. If really we need a perspective, if from my domain, I will say political domain, as we know today in ILHAM, the Asian values. What are Asian values? What are Southeast Asia? And through your novel, I can see the Malaysian Peninsula and Indonesia. Even I see the line that animal cannot cross this line. This is the first time I heard about it. And I just found out so the land we are living in is so connected. It's always connected. We can see from the journey and until today, we're from regionalism, from globalization, and from multilateralism, and today ILHAM. So you are doing a great job to answer who are we, and it's an important question about ILHAM, Asian, who are we, and we need to recall the history and use our own perspective and interpretation. Because there's no fixed answer. Yeah, thank you. That's my comment.
Okay. Thank you very much for summarizing what we try to do.
I think with that we can close the session.
There's one more.
One last question.
Thank you very much. I really enjoy your presentation and your stories. My question is less heavy-hearted than the others, but equally important. In your upcoming graphic novel, would you include his different attitudes tasting durian in Malacca and Sarawak? Thank you.
Yeah, we know about the durian, the different durians he tasted in Malacca and in Sarawak. But we are trying to make it short novel. So, yeah, until now we have not thought about including his eating of durians in the novel. Yeah.
But we including the bamboo.
Okay. Thank you. So on behalf of ILHAM, we would like to thank Yoong, Chia, and Ming very much for that interesting talk.